I don't know if you all saw the clips coming out from some sort of senatorial something. I don't know. I think it had something to do with some women's issue. I just honestly don't know what. But we have this is a Berkeley law professor. If you want to have a picture of why our society is absolutely doomed, if there is not, I'm not even going to say if it does not. I don't think there's anything our society can possibly do in and of itself to avert doom at this point. If God is not merciful in bringing a great awakening level revival of truth, this insanity, and it's insanity. I do not apologize for calling this what it is. It's insanity. Will be the end of us. There's no two ways about it. Here's let's listen to this together. I actually have two clips, and it's the same lady, but you'll get the sense of things. Some of you have seen this already. Let's get a deep seat in the saddle here.
Lead lives that are filled with dignity.
Okay, never mind that. We did not remember to check this. It's been a long time since we did this. It's not the Dell. I think it's this one. I hope. Let's see.
Lead lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And
that
to
means
your way of thinking, that happens when more Black babies are aborted.
I believe, I trust, I love Black people with the capacity for pregnancy. I think they have agency, they have intelligence, they know what is best for themselves, and I would love to create the conditions under which they can live lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And do you think a baby that
before we go on, the listening to leftists again, back in the day when the Soviet Union still existed, you would hear Pravda, you would hear, and even with China as well after the fall of the Soviet Union, communist countries, leftists, abuse language. They abuse it. They redefine every term. And that's what we are seeing in our country today. Every word that used to have meaning, racism, we used to know what that meant. We used to know what a racist was. Now you're a racist for any reason. Now you're a racist for turning right too slowly in front of somebody else. I mean, it is used so widely it has no meaning anymore. Dignity and worth were just used. Dignity and worth in whose sight? What do those words even mean? If you cannot recognize the humanity of the preborn child, if you cannot recognize the scientific reality of the uniqueness of the genetic code that results from the fertilization process in human experience, if you cannot recognize, if you are so dull morally, ethically, and spiritually that you cannot recognize that you had a relationship. We know now. I was thinking Sunday night, I took Summer and Clementine and January to church. And they needed a ride, and so I picked them up, and on the way home, some funny conversation started in the back seat of the car, which often happens when you have girls the age of Clementine and January. And of course, Summer and I are sitting up front, and we're dying laughing. And Summer is in her last trimester. We're looking forward very much to the arrival of Ransom. And I'm listening to Summer laughing. And we know that the child in the womb can hear these things. And that the mother's voice and mental attitude impacts that child even before birth. But we live in a day where we have an entire political party that has become a religious cult. And this religious cult has as its central sacrament the murder of preborn children. So just as when I was involved many, many years ago with Operation Rescue, I was when my wife was pregnant with Summer. And my son had been born 7 weeks early. So he had been neonatal intensive care and things like that. And so I was already deeply aware at that time that there were people who felt it would be completely appropriate to have killed him in the womb. And the utter arbitrariness, the stupidity, the evil of looking someone in the eye and saying, yes, it would have been all right to kill that child on this day, but the next day, once he's born, then you can't, even though he was born prematurely. And there might be another child that is still in the womb that is 3 days older or a week older or 10 days older. But since they're in the womb is the deadly zone, and they're good to kill. You can chop them up, but you can't now chop up this one. At least there are people promoting the cult of death, the culture of death, who are open to us saying, yeah, we should give it 6 months, decide whether, 6 months down the road, it's not working out too well, you're not getting the sleep you need, go ahead and whack the kid. There are people that are now saying that. And that makes perfect sense from their worldview, because it's us that matter. It's me. It's my 401k. I am the only thing that really does matter, because there is no God. There is no future. There is no judgment. And so my personal happiness, however I define that, is all that matters. And so we have this cult that exists in our day. And joined with it, of course, is the denial of the most basic elements of human life: what a man is, what a woman is, what a mother is, what a father is, what a child is. All these things are now up for grabs in this insane, wacko, utterly shameful, should not be respected by anyone for any reason, insanity, moral and spiritual insanity that exists in our day. But these are the people who run our universities. That's why, as a Christian parent, why would leave everything else aside from what your child's going to be exposed to? Why would you want to contribute? These organizations already have billions of dollars. They are rolling in money. I don't know why anyone ever donates anything to a university. They are rolling in dough. And so why would we want to promote that kind of thing? I don't know. So listen to the abusive language. These are not stupid people, but these are people who are desperately evil. They're desperately evil. And they do, as a result, because they stay in their own little place, their own little echo chamber, they have the mental maturity and the emotional maturity and the ethical maturity of about a 6-year-old. That's about as far as you can go, because after that, you start realizing how stupid everything the left is saying. People with the capacity to become pregnant. Just, wow. How far have we gone? That's how, if in the year 2000, I had said that there would be people testifying before Congress that would talk about people with the capacity to become pregnant rather than using the term woman, everyone would have looked at me and said, you are absolutely insane. You're nuts. And now, here we are. Here we are. This is what we're experiencing. And we are supposed to bow down and worship these people. We are supposed to honor these people. I will not honor evil. I will not honor ethical and moral pygmies. I won't do it. And you shouldn't either. It degrades and debases all of us. I don't care if she's a black woman. Doesn't matter. The white liberal women are worse than black liberal women. It doesn't matter. But at least I know she's a woman. At least we've got that going for us. We're doing better than most people are. So we continue on.
Alive has value.
Yes.
Do you think that a baby that is not yet born has value?
I believe that a person with a capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence. They have agency. They have
I'm talking about
dignity.
the baby.
And I'm talking about the person with the capacity for pregnancy.
You're not answering the question. I'm asking.
I'm answering a more interesting question to me.
Did you catch that? I'm answering a more interesting question to me. Again, I'm sorry. This woman is supposed to be a law professor. And so I expect something of someone who is a professor of law. I expect a level of maturity. I expect a level of ethics. I expect a level of morality, of intellect. None of these things are present. IQ of a wet shoelace. Unbelievable. And this is what the system is meant to produce. The university system was once meant to produce critical thinkers who would have laughed at the foolishness of this stuff. But now it is only meant to produce one way of thinking. And it's an immaturity. It's a childishness.
That the baby that is not yet born, let's say the day before this mother delivers, do you think that baby has value?
I think that the person with the capacity for pregnancy has value, and they should have the ability to control what happens to their lives.
Well, and I just note you refuse to answer the question.
Yes, she refuses to answer the question. She can't answer the question. It is the essence of the culture of death to do everything, including acting like a 6-year-old, to not allow the victim of abortion to ever be seen in the conversation. You cannot talk about the uniqueness of that human child, the result of the miracle of conception. You can't talk about it. And so here you have ostensibly a self-proclaimed legal scholar who will act like a brat, a little child, before the Senate to maintain the fiction of the culture of death. The fiction of the culture of death. Well, Cornyn wasn't the only one to have the experience of seeking to speak with this young woman. I now realize that I can't click the expand thing because that's actually in the video. It's not in the thing there. That's all right. We understand. Josh Hawley, likewise, heard her using this people with capacity for pregnancy. You know, if I didn't have granddaughters, well, grandkids, really, because my grandsons, including Ransom and that, will be deeply impacted by this moral and ethical pygmyism as well. But I especially think of my granddaughters because this transgender insanity is so anti-woman in so many ways. It's truly disgusting. And so to see women degrading themselves in this way. But if I didn't have grandkids, you would listen to this stuff and you'd be tempted to just laugh. How can anyone be this insane? This just completely discombobulated? I don't know. But what you'll discover is when you attempt to engage the left, they have a very limited playbook. A very limited playbook. And what they will do is accuse you of violence. They'll accuse you of violence. If you do not buy into their insanity, then you are committing violence. And you can understand why, if these people ever engage in actual debate where both sides get equal time and where there is forced cross-examination, these people just fall apart. I mean, she's falling apart here. I mean, to any rational person, to any adult, it's obvious that she cannot even begin to defend her position. That's a given. But they get away with this because they own the media. There's no one that will push them. There's no one that will press them except a few people like this. So here's where Josh Hawley, well, just watch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Before I want to visit with you, Ms. Meskey, but before I do, I just want to clear one thing up. Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it.
Now, to catch that, so she can't talk about women's rights because she can't define a woman. She has been talking about people with the capacity for pregnancy. And so now he's like, okay, so what is the essence of this right that you're talking about? Because it used to be called women's rights. But once you've destroyed women, you can't really have women's rights anymore. And so he's just slightly presses one step, one question. And immediately, well, this is transphobic. Transphobic. And you're supposed to just immediately drop to your knees. Oh, please forgive me for not embracing the mythology of your disconnected, drug-induced, hazed world where there's 147 different genders. But this is what you get. This is what you get, and that's, well, you're going to see.
Opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So
pregnant.
you're denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Okay, this woman is so arrogant. I don't know that I could control myself even while demonstrating her utter idiocy. The utter idiocy of her worldview. I mean, she's bought into it and she's promoting it, so she's responsible for it. But so if you do not buy into something that people have only really believed in this country in any way, shape, the past 10 years the most, then you are guilty of violence and you're causing people to kill themselves. And look, you know why it's so effective? Because the vast majority of American citizens are not trained in critical thought. They're trained to emote, not to think critically. the majority of American citizens under the age of 50 today would have difficulty dealing with any logical problem. Word problems that we used to have to solve in school. They would have difficulty dealing with any logical problem while emotionally excited. Because for them, emotion and the thought process are the same thing. They've not been taught to suppress and control their emotion so as to be able to think straight. This is always, whenever there's a movie and, the bad guy's coming or the monster's coming or the aliens are coming or something, and a woman starts screaming, since I've been a kid, it's been stop screaming and run, lock the door, do something logical. just stop. And sadly, most guys would be able to understand that back in the olden days, but today the guys do the same thing now too. So it doesn't really matter. But anyway, there is, that's what's going on in our government. The Chinese are taking over the world, Africa, South America. They are taking over. The amazing thing is they are taking over all the countries that have the raw materials to make solar panels and everything else, while we are converting to all of that. I'm just going to tell you my honest opinion. Okay, this isn't necessarily a directly theological issue, but we have been taken over by our enemies. We are being run by our enemies. And I believe that the regime that's currently in charge is guilty of the greatest treason against the United States ever. I believe we're being run by traitors. That's where we are. And that's a pretty sad thing to have to say. But I think there's very strong evidence of it. Very, very strong evidence of it.